Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
And inspire you to do even greater things.
In this episode, I continue the conversation with Jacob Kurian, an IT industry veteran and presently the Honorary Secretary of the Association of People with Disability in Bangalore. In the previous episode, Jacob talked about a cold relationship with a senior executive at Unisys and how that changed because of one opportunity with GE. He mentioned a call received from GE to explore the possibility of getting software developed in India. In this episode, he shares what happened to the GE opportunity and how that was a significant event for the Indian IT services industry. Then goes on to share his personal decision to return to India and joining Titan Industries as the Chief Marketing Officer and taking on the responsibility of the Chief Information Officer as well. In shifting the role from being an IT solutions provider to a solutions consumer, what are some of the challenges, such as getting users to converge on IT requirements, handling production issues that can impact the core business, and finally, we talk about his investment role that he had taken on and tips on what it takes for a techie to become an entrepreneur, and the need for short releases, validating cycles, and not making good the enemy of perfect. Listen on.
There's a call from GE. Reto wants you to go up and meet this guy called Ed Skyko. He has some interest in doing some work in India. So what had happened was Jack Welch had made his famous first trip to India. And Jack went back and told all his divisions, I want you to do work in India. Okay. So Ed Skyko was the CIO of GE. Okay. And I don't think Ed Skyko could even find India on the map. Okay. I think if he gave him a map, then there's India. But he was in a panic. So I went up to meet him and Ed said, started with, do you all have computers in India? I'm the CIO of GE. I'm supposed to give some work to India. Do you all have computers? So the fact that we were in boroughs and it was an American name and all that, I think gave them some confidence because they also then called boroughs head office and asked. Now, GE was a 100% IBM shop. Mm-hmm. But getting a say-so from a fellow American corporation was important. And we decided with him that we would pick 4 IT companies. These IT companies would go and present to all the major GE divisions. And at the end of it, GE would give out some contracts. So around early 90s, okay? So 1991. So we picked TCS. And then we picked 2 small companies that were doing basically PC work because we were mainframe guys. We didn't do PC stuff. It was low tech. Yeah. The 2 PC firms we picked was Wipro and Infosys.
Wow.
Okay. And these 4 firms led by Prakash. Okay, Prakash was the head. I don't remember who was on the TCS team, who was on the Infosys team, but I'm sure many of the legends of today's IT business were probably there on it. And we went and made pictures at Aero Engines. This GE was the biggest company, diversified lighting, locomotives. And the question was still not answered. How are we going to do anything with this? Okay, because we had no IBM mainframe. But The guys in seats were very entrepreneurial. They went and got some computer time in, I think, CMC or somewhere else. And we said, no, bid karna hi padega. So we put in bids. And because we were the coordinating thing, and because they were doing trial projects, they gave projects to everybody. So they gave some to TBL, they gave some to TCS, they gave some to Wipro and Infosys. Later, TBL found out that we were going to do work for IBM on IBM mainframes. And instead of thinking about it strategically, saying, wow, this might give Unisys a segue into a giant account, they were petty about it, and we were not allowed to do anything. But I mention this because, to me, I think GE's stamp of approval for Indian IT was, I think, a landmark moment of credibility for US corporations. That if GE can do it, then it must be kosher, must be legit. And of those projects, TCS, of course, was already large, but I think for the longest time, GE was a real bellwether client for Infosys and Wipro. And I think they grew into the giants they are today out of that little set of projects that came about in this rather, happenstance manner. I'm sure history will rewrite backwards that it was a great strategic move and it was already on the plans and we really wanted to penetrate GE, and so we got in all that stuff. But I happened to be there when the call came, and so it was nice to be there at a moment. Though again, we got motte from it, But I think the sector and the industry did great. We decided in 1993, after living in the US for 5 years, I had an extremely successful time there. When we left, we had an order book that was 100% of the next year's target. So I don't think I've ever achieved that, or very few people have that luck. We did so many different things, which I won't bore everybody with. But we decided we wanted to come back to India. My wife and I were living in 2 different cities, and this living with one leg in India, one leg here was proving to be challenging. We said we should either quit and join the many TBLers who've decided to take a green card and stay on, or we should come back to India and try to see if we can make a go of it. The number one question I'm asked is, how come I didn't join Infosys or Wipro, and be an IT billionaire talking to you? But the reality is, when we looked at coming back to India, the scale of Infosys and Wipro was so small compared to what Tata Burroughs was, or Tata Unisys was, and TCS was, that really they were not even an option. They were really, I'm sure I'd have got a job if I had tried, but I didn't even consider it because it seemed like I would be going backwards in time to running a small region of the many regions that I ran. People forget that after 10 years of Infosys being around, their revenue was still at $1 million. What they have achieved since is truly remarkable, and hats off to them for everything they've achieved. But just to contextualize that, in 92, when we were thinking of coming back, there was only TCS and us. Everybody else was rounding off errors. And so I went back to the task group, and they said, okay, there's some opportunity in Titan. Titan is looking for a guy with international sales experience, who's prepared to come back to India, and who knows watches. So I said, look, I have zero knowledge of watches. I had only one watch, that too, which my wife had bought and given me at that time. But Titan was a hugely successful company. We also made a decision that we should not stay in Bombay, because a lot of people who came back to India were back in the US in 6 months' time. And since we had neither home nor heart in Bombay, we said, let's make it easier on ourselves. and come back to India to go to Bangalore, where my mother was living. So I persuade Tata Burroughs, Tata Unisys to let me go. I get to meet Mr. Xerxes Desai in New York, and Xerxes says, has an interview, goes for a walk with me, and says, okay, fine. 2 out of 3 is not bad. You have some international sales experience, you're prepared to come back to India. If you don't know watches, it's fine. We teach you watches. So we come back, I join Titan. Everybody there says, oh, you must be our new EDP manager. So I said, no, I'm not. It was also the time when every Tata company, and there were at one count almost 8 Tata companies who had started IT export business. So the guy who was supposed to be my boss, was quite lit that he had interviewed me, and he thought, task guy, another arrogant SOB, told me, fine, I don't really need you in the watch and jewelry business, but you can start a software business. So I told him, why would I leave the largest software company, MNC company, and come and join you to start a software business? I mean, are you nuts? I don't want to do this. So I went from being almost king of the hoop, coming back with this very patriotic feeling that some of us must come back to India, etc. And in my first day in my new job, being told that I really did have that the guy who I was going to report to didn't want me. Everybody else looked at me and said, but he has no experience in watches at all. What is he here for? So I, by now, had learned that if one could survive as a non-techie in a tech company, everything else is easier. He's okay. You can cross any other bar, any bar that you want in terms of knowledge. But I did realize that Titan was very antiquated as far as its IT systems were concerned. And anytime you want to do something, it was a hodgepodge of stuff. It was poorly led. I don't think anybody understood that. So I would keep complaining to my boss. And one day he called me and said, okay, stop complaining. You are now the CIO of Titan. I said, what? So, but things were so bad that I said, okay, so just sitting and complaining and never having a solution, we might as well just get on with it. So I was both chief marketing officer and CIO. And I must say that the CIO job, after 10 years in IT, I learned more in the 3 or 4 years that I was CIO or CTO of Titan, about how difficult it is to try and get users to converge on a set of things. You will remember how you all used to keep complaining to us front-end guys, get the spec signed off, get the functional spec signed, get the distance. And we would be like, oh, what these guys are doing, why don't they just damn sign it? But when you went to the other side, you realize, oh my God, it's like herding cats. You think you get 3 guys in 1 room, 2 have problem. And it's really, really hard from the user side to actually come up with a set of specifications that somebody could develop it. And if you didn't do that properly, then life was a continuous loop of constant. If you release it, doesn't work, this, that, and the other. So that was a whole different and quite invaluable unintended experience as CIO. After 4 years, fortunately, I hired somebody and hired a proper qualified CIO who then went on to serve Titan well for many years. But yeah, that was an interesting.
Having been on the supplier side, when you move to a consumer side or the buyer side in Titan, were there any lessons that you learned or any tricks that you used to adopt on the supplier side? Were you saying the same scripts being played, and then were you able to handle that differently as a buyer?
So I think the first thing you try to do always is you try to repeat successful formula.
Mhm.
And then you realize that it's just not going to work for 2 or 3 very important reasons on the client side.
Mm.
One is talent is completely different. Talent levels are completely different. In Tata Unisys, we were fortunate that guys like you came from the most blue chip of institutions, educational institutions, backgrounds, etc. A lot of the talent you typically find in an EDP environment or an internal IT department is typically ingrown talent, people who've worked in that shop for many years. And depending on how much exposure they got, their worldviews were kind of driven by that. People were always hungry to learn, keen to learn, etc. But there was a limitation mismatch in terms of talent. The third thing that I realized when I went there was Titan was staunchly homegrown. Okay, they had refused to bring in any external consultant, tech firm, etc., other than hardware and infrastructure side. But on the big business application side, really didn't have a history of working with consultants. So partly because we had come from that side, I could quickly assess that, okay, there's some value that an outsider would bring. If nothing else, to just sort out all these many conflicting claims that different people had. It would also significantly augment the talent that we had a limitation in terms of what we could hope to have inside the house. And the third big difference from the days you were on the service provider side was you were constantly in a production environment.
Mm.
So, everything ran off software, whether it's purchasing, production planning, shop job cards, even dispatchers, warehouses, everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, whereas typically when you're doing development in a software company, you are cognizant of it, but you say, oh, we'll do that when we go parallel and after user acceptance testing. Then when we switch off in parallel is when we are juggling these two balls.
Mm-hmm.
But that's usually a short period and we disappear from it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas here you're constantly juggling this need to keep the production environment running while also trying to draw the new template and build for the next environment. And at times that can get quite tiring because priorities are, do you focus on generating this month's production plan, purchase orders, releases to vendors, etc. And somewhere there'll be a glitch. Then everybody has to rush to fix that glitch because that will hold up production. And production isn't something, once you lose a production day, you can't really catch up on it.
Mm.
So in a way, it was very different. I remember, at least in the SEEPs end, where you could do your thing and you didn't have 50 guys saying this isn't working, that isn't working, my PC isn't running, etc., etc. And you had to juggle that while doing this. So I'd say these were the big differences. They had never gone outside, never worked with a consulting firm. Talent was different. And third was this whole need to keep production running, operations running while you were thinking about the long and short of it.
Okay. Yeah, I think we have been talking for quite some time, but I can't close without asking, one question about the next phase of your career as an investor. So there are actually two questions that I have. Now, one, as an investor, when you saw pitches from, let's say, software, ideas or projects and non-software projects, since this is primarily for software people, are there any patterns that you see or any things that the software pitches or people who are from a technical background, so to say? There's a second part is, what does it take for a techie to become an entrepreneur?
I think the biggest thing that was often missing was what we would call uh, an explanation of product market fit. Okay. Um, People who were very technical um, seem to believe that because I have created this great uh,
App.
product,
Okay.
yeah, app, product, whatever it is, people will come. Okay. Yeah. So it's like the old, if you build it, they will come kind of statement. And very often would not understand why you needed to actually explain to an investor who quite often is not an expert in that area, a simple answer to, okay, so what's the problem you're solving? How big is that problem? And how do you plan to eventually monetize this, even if there's a curve at some point, or who's going to buy it? I think now the environment has evolved enough over the last 10 years that these are questions that people now ask of themselves before they there are workshops, there are boot camps, there's so many resources available on the net. But when I first transitioned to this, quite often that would be the thing. And then you would have people throwing a tantrum, saying these guys are not patriots, they are not supporting Indian R&D, they're not doing this, they're not doing that. Forgetting that the money that we had was not our own money, that the money was given as a fiduciary responsibility to the fund investors, and they had to invest that money and return it at the end of the period. And so each person looked at an opportunity and then made that kind of subjective assessment of, will this eventually work? Will this team eventually take it to market? Will this solution eventually be able to withstand a Google or somebody else coming into that turf? What differences does it have that are unique from everything else in the competition? But instead, everybody who was turned down quite often tends to take it very personally, without giving credence to the fact that maybe that fund manager was just an ignorant ass. Okay, he just didn't get your great vision. You should move on now and find the guy who believes in your vision. There may be another guy who believes, but this guy is either too ignorant to understand your genius, or it doesn't fit. And funds also have specific mandate areas. They have specific limitations of how much they want to invest in a particular sector. So there's a whole complex set of things. But I would often find myself on stage listening to people in the audience freaking out that we should support it, we should do this, when that's really not their job.
So what does it take for a techie to become an entrepreneur? Are there training programs I can attend, or get some degree, or intern with somebody?
I think what you see in the US is what a lot of a good template to follow that many people are following, which is you try to assemble a team where you have complementary parts. Okay. You don't have to be the guy who knows everything. You can play in your area of competence as long as you have two other people, or one or two other people who complement you. Okay. So I can go back to my TBL days. Most techies felt, who are these marketing guys? They don't add any value. They just win bags. And those who can't code go to marketing, was the kind of thing. But everybody has a role to play. And you will find that many founders in the US of Indian origin have chosen to remain CTOs. They don't want the CEO role, because the CEO role has certain complexities to it. But to everybody, whether you're building a solution or this thing, I think going and testing it with people or businesses or companies, whoever is going to be your end client, is, I think, an invaluable way for you to learn yourself. Because hearing it firsthand is always far better than hearing it through grapevines or research reports or Magic Quadrant reports, etc. So I think you should play to your strength, but recognize that success usually requires a complementarity of capabilities. And most funders will also look beyond a single individual. Okay, they also want to see team, they want to see team dynamics, because they also don't want to put their money on, say, I give $1 million to Shiv Guru, and tomorrow he says, I don't feel like doing this. It's all equity investment. So it's at 100% risk. They also want to see, is this a good team? Will they work together? Do they complement each other? Do they have similar values? Especially in early stage investing, there is really little to show. It's more, a lot of it is what judgment the investor is drawing from your vision, but also how he thinks you're going to be able to execute it. And I think in today's world, that life cycles are so short. Anything you start today and say, in 10 years, I'll be ready, you're probably obsolete. So the other thing that that I try to share to people is, don't make good the enemy of great. While you're trying to make a great product, you may have missed the boat because somebody else has come in, and new words like agile and this and that is about doing multiple rapid iterations than building a great release, working for years on it, and then coming out. The market may have shifted by then, given how things are moving. So everyone typically says, no, I just have 2 more features and it's going to be fantastic. And I just add 1 more feature and then I'll take it to test it. And you always show it to somebody. They will give you feedback. It'll help you also prioritize what you feel is important. So again, when we were on the client side, some of the things that people would come and pitch us, we would listen to them and say, you just totally don't get it, okay? That is totally not important to us, okay? Whereas 9 and 10 on your 10-point slide, that's really important to us. So to get that perspective, if you talk to people, discuss it, show it, they will tell you, look, 9 and 10 are really important, not 1 to 8. 1 to 8, whether it's there or not, I don't care. So unless you get that thing happening, and I think today's entire philosophy of development and software building and tool building and APIs and reusable blocks and all that stuff is stuff that we used to fantasize about in the days of Link and that. So all that is a reality today for somebody to be able to rapidly prototype instead of, and that's what we would encourage. Everybody keep testing the market, keep showing it to people, get feedback, keep iterating your product, and don't wait till it's perfect because nobody is expecting perfection.
So a related question is, should a techie, because a lot of techies do approach me or ask for advice, what should I do? Because couples, we are both working, maybe one of us can have a job and then I'm willing to take a risk. So what should I do? Okay. While on one hand, we say that follow your passion. If you really have a problem to solve, look at all that. But then they also get influenced by saying, oh, EdTech, there's a lot of money flowing into EdTech now. Should I get into EdTech? How do I pick an area to find a problem?
Yeah. So the answer to that is really, it's there on the investor side as well. On the investor side, we call it FOMO. Okay, fear of missing out. Yeah. So you don't know anything about education, but EdTech, everyone's doing EdTech. Oh my God, I got to invest in EdTech. So I think this thing reminds me also of 2008 when everybody wanted to do a startup, everybody wanted to do right now it's almost embarrassing to say that you're working in a regular company, you're not in a startup, you're not bootstrapping, you're not. So I don't know what the answer to that question is. I do know, however, that no matter what you say, they'll finally go and do what they want. So I've now made peace with the fact that of all the kids sent me, They come because their parents or somebody said, go and talk to this old man, but they are eventually going to go and do exactly what they please. And that's the way it should be, you know.
Wonderful, Jacob. I think that's a very positive thing and tells everyone to go, we say, find your passion and do it. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Jacob.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.